Lina Przhedetsky is here to talk to you about big data, big opportunities, navigating AI and data governance in citizen science for environmental conservation. Lina is a research fellow at the ARC Centre of Excellence for Automated Decision-Making in Society, based at the University of Melbourne. Through her work on the Automated Decision-Making Ecosystems and Multi-Species Relationships project, she is investigating how AI technologies can facilitate, mediate, limit and reshape our understandings of and interactions with nature. Take it away, Lina.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Looks like the images are getting a little bit grainy, so we'll see if that changes. So let's get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Paul, for that introduction. In addition to being a research fellow at Melbourne Uni, I will say that I'm also a passionate nature and animal lover and a citizen scientist. My interest in this space actually came about through learning about Frog ID many years ago and the New South Wales government's Wild About Whales. And I tell this story because I remember using that app quite actively, and all of a sudden the funding got cut. And it made me think, where did the data go? And what happens to this engaged community? And then, I started joining all of your Australian Native Animals Facebook groups and being quite interested in, people actually using these community bodies to make decisions about enacting conservation. So whether they kill a ratus or, whether they have an antechinus that they're going to take to the vet. So for me, I've always been kind of fascinated. And as someone who's worked in technology and AI policy, I saw this as a really interesting opportunity to combine these interests. So the centre that I'm part of is focused on artificial intelligence, data and technologies. And we were given the opportunity to build a project that covers automated decision-making, ecosystems, and multi-species relationships. Specifically, we're focusing on data about the environment and how it is governed. So if that sounds vague, just think for a minute about the rich conversations we have about personal information and the regulatory frameworks we have to do with privacy. We have these governance structures because the collection, use, and disclosure of personal data is very consequential. But so too is environmental data, and we just haven't had as developed a conversation about this. So the interactions between technology and the environment are a really hot topic right now, but there are many practical, political, legal, and ethical issues and questions that need to be worked through. So for example, if we can use AI technologies to speak with whales, are we ready to hear what they have to say? To be clear, that's not the question I'm answering. However, I've put this out there to orient the research. This project is about acknowledging the possibilities that technology offers, but also thinking about how the design and use and the outputs of technologies can be more values aligned. And I'm not saying that there's one way of doing it. I'm saying we need to have a bit more of a think as to how different organisations, individuals can think about data issues to kind of navigate them in the environmental and conservation work that they're doing. So before I go on, I'll flag that we're still early on in our project, and I'm very, very keen to get additional input. So if you have thoughts, feedback, want to connect, want to introduce me to a colleague, please do. So let's start with the context in which we're conducting the research. So globally, rapid technological developments are enabling environmental data to be collected, generated, and analysed in new ways. Despite increased awareness about the adverse environmental impacts of AI, techno-solutionist narratives continue to dominate and shape discussions about the intersection of technology and the environment. You need more data, you need more tech to solve all of your problems. At the same time, we also know that certain technologies can afford us new capabilities for environmental protection, monitoring, and management that we didn't have before. You'll see two images on the screen. One is CSIRO's Spark, which uses machine learning to predict bushfire spread. And at the bottom, you see Felixa, an AI-enabled image recognition-based trap designed to capture wild cats. So the narrative around both technologies is that data-driven algorithmic solutions can augment and support human efforts to achieve certain environmental goals. And that is true, but I'm also looking at some of the downsides. So, how do organizations think through the benefits and challenges of using data-driven technologies? There are key questions to ask, and this is what the project is exploring. And at the core of the project, we're asking what's changed as a result of digital technologies. So from here on in, this presentation is going to zoom in on the data governance challenges in relation to citizen science projects. And to illustrate, I'm going to focus on bird data. However, our project is not specifically tied to birds. Most of the slides are framed as questions, challenges that we want to find out more about and learn how your organisations are working through them. And we're very mindful that everyone's going to answer these questions slightly differently, and that's also part of what we're interested in. So, the first set of questions is what does the data capture? It might seem like a simple question, but it's not. The last half century, for example, has seen 4 separate classification systems that can be used to answer which bird is that. It's 2025 and AviList is hot off the press. It's a unified global classification system that aims to replace the others. As you can imagine, transitioning people, databases, organisations and policies to a new classification system is no easy task. We should also remember that these classification systems don't necessarily incorporate traditional knowledges. So I'm thinking here of Nason's study of Antikythera bird classification systems, which showed an alternative classification system used by several Indigenous language groups. Here, we should also be thinking about people's personal privacy. When gathering data, what might be captured unintentionally? And, of course, no discussion of AI technologies can go on without mentioning bias. And we know that people tend to gravitate towards certain species over others. That means we'll often get an incomplete picture of what's actually happening. The next set of questions relates to how that data is captured. So a hallmark of citizen science is that, of course, it's more accessible to the average person, but there are a range of factors that compromise people's access. Might be technological literacy, connectivity, or language barriers. Data capture also engages various laws, such as those governing drone use. Think about exclusion zones around whales being ignored and people trespassing on private property. The technologies that are used to capture data require organisations to also make trade-offs. So, for example, when choosing a platform, you might be thinking about something that's top-down, a well-established platform, or a bottom-up approach that is really engaging your community and developing something bespoke to suit their needs. But of course, we have issues of price. We have issues of interoperability. The next set of questions is around who owns the data, or a better way of putting it is who has stewardship over the data. So funding and ownership directly influence the capabilities of citizen science tools and the data that they collect. Often, citizen science projects are publicly funded. As we've seen with the Trump administration's funding cuts, which directly threaten many important initiatives, we need to be thinking about who owns the data and who has custodianship and stewardship over it in the future. We also need to remember that citizen science regularly use commercial platforms, such as Facebook, to conduct activities, and that there are also commercial operators that build for citizen scientists. And importantly, we need to think about data ownership and the care of data in the process. So who is actually taking care of that data and making sure that we're looking after it, whether that's thinking about it from security arrangements to actually thinking about the time and effort that people have invested in collecting this data. Now, how is the data verified or ground truthed? So I'm a policymaker by my background, and one of the things that we've heard touched on this morning already is, is there going to be validity in the data? Are people going to be questioning its legitimacy? And I'm interested in digging deeper into those questions. We're talking also about quality control. What are the standardized protocols? What are the training and resources that are provided to help improve the quality and integrity of that data? It could also mean misconduct and more. And given that citizen science data is used to inform the development and application of law and policy, award funding, it's critical that there are measures in place to ensure that it's credible and reliable, so that everybody that's contributing to this data is feeling like their data is actually being used and applied. But there are, of course, also trade-offs between factors like quality, privacy, trust, and transparency. And the last point on this page is about the increasing use of automation in citizen science projects. So, for example, eBird flags unusual sightings and often asks for justification or initial context. But as our climate changes, we are seeing channel-billed cuckoos fly into Sydney at odd times of the year. So if that observation is flagged, how do we contest it? Are we actually learning something new about how our environment is changing, or is it seen as a glitch? We also need to be asking why the data is captured in this way. So citizen science projects are socio-technical initiatives. There are motivations, there's altruism, there's social connection, career progression, environmental protection, and improved self-esteem. There's also gamification, like we heard mentioned earlier. And when thinking about why data is collected in particular ways, we also need to think about who is included and excluded from projects and who is on the receiving end and how this shapes project design and prioritization. We need to think about how the data is used. And there's a lot more to say out there, but I suppose one thing that I've been really concerned about is how some of this citizen science data can be used to actually harm animals. So, for example, ethical birding discourages disclosure of hololocations and nesting sites that are in use, but you still see plenty of people crowding to see rare birds. Data has been used for poaching and wildlife traffic, and here I should mention that I was very disappointed to see actual locations of leadbeater's possum on iNaturalist with very precise dates, times, and locations. So, we need to be thinking about who has access to that, whether that's used for wildlife poaching. And of course, we have issues that are controversial, but widespread use of techniques such as bird call playback. So actually augmenting how people interact with the environment and, lure birds. So collecting data is one thing, but using it is another. And basically, we're still trying to get a bit more of a comprehensive picture of how data is used by scientists, whether citizen science data is used to supplement some policy decision-making and some, university research. And some of the examples that we've seen are really nice examples where those two things come together beautifully. And our last set of questions relates to citizen science initiatives and their ability to promote the interests of data subjects. So here we're asking, how do citizen science projects reinforce or challenge the logics of datification and techno-solutionism? How might we think about market-based and voluntary solutions, social norms, and platform architectures, as opposed to mandatory requirements? How can non-human interests, multi-species relations, and human-nature connections be promoted through citizen science projects? And can environmental data stewardship be part of the solution? And importantly, how do citizen science projects promote respect and care for nature? So what we hope is that we'll chip away at some of these questions. And ultimately, our next bit of work, we're hoping to produce a combination of academic literature and practical resources to help individuals and organisations work through some of these questions. We're conducting interviews, we're reading widely and wildly, I suppose. We're gathering case studies, hopefully some of you might be featured, and workshopping the tools and co-designing the tools that we produce. And we know that there is no one correct way of navigating these issues, but we want to make sure that we can help people and organisations navigate these questions in ways that align with their values, while making sure that they minimise the risks and maximise the benefits that are posed by technologies. So please feel free to get in touch. I'm around, otherwise my QR code will take you to a very crappy Google Doc which just has my name and email. Thank you.